Hello, welcome to the Screenwriting Masterclass. I am Visakesa Chandrasekaram, the writer, director and producer of two films, Frangipani and Pangshu. So, my masterclass is titled today, Developing Your Storyline from Concept to Screenplay. I'm going to take you through a 7-step journey, typically which I follow. And of course, you don't have to follow the same steps, but perhaps you would like to know. These are the 7 steps that I would follow. Number 1, the idea. 2, the scope. 3, storyline. 4, vision. 5, philosophy. 6, write. 7, rewrite. So, in this journey, I will be mostly using examples from my second feature film, Pangshu, and also I might use some visuals. The reason being, actually, that I'm more familiar with the visuals in my films, as well as to make sure that we are not going to violate any copyright laws by using someone else's film.
එළියට බහින්න එපා කිව්වහම අපි ගෙවල් වලට වෙලා හිටියා. ගෙවල් වල හිටපු මිනිස්සුන්ට නන්නා දුනන තුවක්කුකාරයෝ ඇවිත් වෙඩි තියලා ගිහින් තිබුණා. උඹ දන්නේ නඩුවේ යට ගහන්න.
මේ නඩුව නිසා අපේ කෙනාගේ තරුත් සේරම ගලවලා දාලා.
එයා එනවා සමාව ගන්න. කවදාද එන්නේ? ළඟදි මේ.
මගේ සුදු පුතා හේනෙන් ඇවිල්ලා එයා කොහෙද දුක් විඳින්න ඉන්නවා කියනකොට මට තේරුනේ නෑනේ.
ලොකෝම මැරිච්ච අයියටත් නින්දා කළා. සුදෝය මැරුණේ අපි හැමෝම වෙනුවෙන්.
අපිට පුළුවනි මරණ සාතිකයේ තැපෑලෙන් ලැබෙන සලස්වන්න.
I'm here to share my story of storytelling, a 7-step journey that I take when I develop a story into a screenplay. Step 1, idea. Quentin Tarantino, one of the well-known filmmakers from the Hollywood, once said, "Why do you have to make a film? You have to make that film because it is a film that no one has seen it before, because you haven't made it yet." Now, that is the typical idea we are looking for. It's a very unique one, very special one. No one has seen it before, and the best person to make that story, tell that story and make that movie is you. So, let's start with the plot. And I have a little circle in the middle here, and then little branches going everywhere. So a plot can be devised into many directions. There are multiple directions. It could go into many ways. So we're going to pick and choose most likely 1, maximum 2, if it is a new style storytelling. So with this plot, we're going to take the story into a specific direction. And this is the most crucial decision that we have to make as screenwriters in the first step. There is one question that you have to ask at the very inception. is cinema is the best media to tell your story? Could it have been told by other medias? A short story, a novel, even a stage play? Why cinema? That is a worthwhile question that you should ask. Now, if I share my ideas about making of Pangshu film, it was originally a stage play, which I have written about 13, 14 years ago. And I didn't do the play, and it was shelved somewhere else. And only very recently, about 4 or 5 years ago, I just dusted it off and took it outside my computer and started just reading it again. I just realized, actually, this is a movie. This is not a stage play. So I started thinking about writing a new screenplay.
ලොකු අම්මේ ටෙලිග්‍රෑම් එකක්
ශාවියෙන්ද පුතේ?
ඔව් නඩුව 17 වෙනිදාට දාලා
පුතා ගැන මොකක් හරි කියලා තියෙනවද?
මහෞසාවියට දාන්න නැතුව වැඩේ යට ගහන්න කරන්න පුළුවන් හැම එකක්ම උන් කරයි. කවුරු කොච්චර ලොකු අම්මව බය කරත් ලොකු අම්මා උන්ට දඩුවම් ලැබෙනකන් අඩියක්වත් පස්සට ගන්න එපා.
Pangshu stage play did have certain cinematic elements, so it could have been told through the medium of cinema rather than the medium of stage play. Now, I would like to share my inspiration of Pangshu film. This is the inspiration, a photograph of a mother, an old, possibly poor mother looking for her disappeared son amongst remains of body parts exhumed from a mass grave. And these photographs I have seen possibly about 20, close to 20 years ago, long time ago. And the memories of this particular picture engraved in my mind, and it was so strong and it kept coming back. And this particular story, Pangshu, was conceived in my imagination from that point onward. Let's move on to next step. Scope. Scope is something very interesting thing to understand. What do we mean by scope? We have to have an understanding about what your film is about. At the same time, what is not your film about. So we have to have some sort of a limitation or a marking that we know exactly which way we're going to go, and we're not going to touch everything else. For example, let's imagine a story with a lot of historical background information. Of course, as a storyteller, you can't bring all those background information into the story. You have to pick and choose and focus only on certain aspect of the story. I ask two questions. What is your film? What is not your film? So we are talking here about the audience. Do you really have to talk about the audience? Not necessarily, but I think it is something that you should consider at the very early stage. If you really have huge faith on your story, perhaps you can ignore thinking about audience and move to the next step of developing your story and come back once you have developed the story and think about what exactly this audience is going to be. But I do think about audience. It is somewhat a commercial and practical decision. Pangshu was made for the local Sri Lankan audience. It was not necessarily made for the international audience. And also it is for the general audience, not necessarily festival-going people, and not necessarily very well educated as people from a certain class. It is for everyone. It is for mothers and the children and the fathers and everybody to sit and watch together. So because of that, I had to maintain certain clarity in the narrative style. So there has to be some sort of clarity, although there were some flashbacks which sometimes actually could have confused the audience. It was mainly a very simple narrative style. And that is actually a conscious decision taken based on my audience. Secondly, the treatment of the story, the way that it was presented, was customized for the local audiences. So there were a lot of references to local aesthetics, local cultural norms, symbols, and so forth. So the local members of the local audience would really understand the context of the story very well. Thirdly, and most importantly, this is not only about the local audience but also about the universal audience, trying to get the audience emotionally engaged with the story. So this is not an attempt to detach the audience, this is not experimental style. I wanted to engage the audience emotionally. And for that, I presented the mother to the forefront, the character of the mother who is looking for her son, whose son was disappeared. And that is the storyline of Pangshu film. And through the mother's character, I hoped that the members of the audience would build that sympathy and try to engage with the point of view of the mother and see everything else in the films through the eyes of the mother. So those were the key decisions that I made considering my audience.
මේ මේ ළමයාව දැකලා තියෙනවද ස්පිරිතාලට එහෙම ගේනවා?
නෑ. මේ පොඩ්ඩක් කොහොම ඉන්න? අර කාමරේ ඉන්නවා එක්කෙනෙක් එයාගෙන් අහමු.
Number 3 is storyline. Wow, that's obvious, isn't it? So these are my watchwords when it comes to screenplay writing. The story, the screenplay must be your life, or it must be your obsession. If it is not your life, or at least if it is not your obsession, I think there will be something missing from the screenplay. What do I mean by that? I mean that it is so organically attached to your emotions and your thinking and your life, and also you are so much attached to this particular screenplay and it becomes part of your life, at least for the period that you are developing it. It is really important, according to my view. And when it becomes your life or your obsession, that plot will be developed into a storyline in a much more organic way. There will be less forcefulness, there will be less deliberate actions. It will be more spontaneous, it will be more organic. This is what I believe. Try this. I repeat, my watchwords are: the screenplay must be your life or your obsession. So, when I write a screenplay, actually I don't write first. I think, I daydream. Not days, not weeks, not months, couple of years. Just live in that story, thinking about the characters of the story, sometimes actually talking to them. I daydream for years. And that is the way that I write screenplays. Of course, you don't have to do that, but perhaps you can try. I do two more things. One is acting. Screenplay writers don't have to act, but I do act, not with many actors, but alone, by myself. I become sometimes one of these characters, and sometimes I shift between characters. I talk to them, I whisper to them, and I get into their shoes and wonder what I would do now. I sometimes think like them. This is what I call obsession. And the second thing is, before writing the screenplay, I write a little bit of prose segments, like short stories. Imagine you ask one of your characters to write a short story about her or him. They will write, this is what I am, this is what I used to be, I grew up like this, these are my dreams, and so forth. And that I do for them. And they are really useful, by the way, later stage, because you can give these short pieces to your actors to explain the history and the background of these characters. Now, I'm not the only person who is doing that, by the way. Very well-known Hollywood director Quentin Tarantino also does that. He's an actor, of course, so he does act his character. And also he does write these pieces of prose for him to get a clarification, and also sometimes to later use with the acting workshops. So when I adapted Pangshu film from a stage play script to a film screenplay, I did write various prose pieces to explain some of these background information, and most of them will never be known to my audience, because those materials are not in the actual film, but it is for myself and my team. And one thing I did when I was writing the screenplay, actually I just separated the stage play script. I did not go back to that. I didn't want to refer to that, and I started writing from scratch. And that exercise actually helped me to have a novel approach, and also just to forget about a lot of things in the original story, and that helped me to bring a lot of new things to this new story. And there were some new characters, like the little girl who lost her mother. That character was not there in this original stage play, and her grandmother was not in the original stage play. And there were a lot of changes happening like that, because I made that conscious decision not to refer to the old materials. This perhaps can be a useful technique when you are adapting a story from a different media.
सदा स्वस्ति भवन्तु ते।
ඉඳගන්න.
ඕනේ පුංචි නෝනා.
මං ඔයාගේ පුටුව ගේන්නද?
එපා පුංචි නෝනා.
ඔයා අපේ අම්මව දන්නවද?
Number 4 is vision. What would you see when you are sitting with the members of the audience in the cinema? The screenplay that you have written has become a movie, and now you are watching that movie on screen. What are the details that you see? What do you hear? What emotions do you get when you watch this movie? And when it comes to vision, I always think there could be multiple visions. There could be more than one visions, and that is good. It is the time that for me, when you have had that vision, when you had imagined, for me to take my tablet and the stylizer or a blank sheet and a pencil to sketch. Yes, I do sketch. I don't write. After too many sketches only, I will sit next to a computer to type. And what I also wanted to say about this vision, you may not have one singular vision. There could be multiple versions. For example, your character who is depressed and who is upset and who is very sad is walking through a street. In one of your visions, the street is empty. There is nobody. And you may have a completely different vision. In that vision, your street is full of people who are not paying any attention to this character. So that is possible. That is okay to have. You have multiple visions. And when you start writing, you will spontaneously pick and choose one alternative. And by now, I have had my vision, and I will start actually breaking down some sort of a story skeleton, which I call some sort of a scenes breakdown. And I sometimes use cards. A card for each scene, a little sketch and a little note on that card. So once I have stuck all these cards of all these scenes, I can arrange it on a table. If they are electronic paintings or sketches like mine, they can be arranged on the screen. And I can move them and reshuffle them around just to change the order and see how the story is going to flow. And of course, you don't have to follow the same way that I do, but you can try this method as well. Now you may think that I'm ready to start writing. Not yet. Let's think about the next step. Actually, before going to the next step, I would like to stop here and talk about what world most known screenplay writers have said about screenplay writing. I have a little sketch, a graphic presentation here for you. Part of that graphic presentation is storyline and part is about character. Now, in this presentation, you will see this Act 1, Act 2 and Act 3 kind of segregation of the storyline. Most storylines would have these 3 separate acts you can very easily identify. But some storylines may not have that very clear expression or presentation of 3 different acts, but most would do. And between these 3 acts, you will have plot points, many plot points. What do we mean by plot points? One of my favorite writers about screenplay writing is Linda Aronson. Linda Aronson says this about plot points. Plot points are some sort of confrontations, unusual events happening to usual people. Unusual events happening to usual people. So between these acts, you will have multiple plot points. Various things are happening to these people. And these plot points actually twist and turn and take your story to a particular direction. That is storyline. Now let's move to characters. Linda Aronson says the characters have a journey. One is the external journey, which we see on screen, what happened to them, what are they going to do, what job they're going to get, what are they going to study, with whom they're going to fall in love, will they have children, will they end up fighting a war, and so forth. That is the external storyline. There is also an internal storyline. Internal storyline is the internal journey that someone would go through. Being loved and losing love, and being happy and losing that happiness and becoming sad. Being so immature and becoming mature, being so selfish and then becoming very altruist. All these are the elements of the internal journey. So we can identify these external and internal journeys of the character. And I would call this film screenplay writing grammar. And here I would like to also mention about something that Sitfield has presented about the 4 elements of character building. Number 1, dramatic need. What does the main character want to gain or to achieve in this journey? Number 2, strong point of view. How does the main character view the world? What is his philosophy and understanding about the world? Number 3, the attitude. What is the attitude and the manner and the way that he behaves, and what sort of mindset that person has towards everyone else and towards himself or herself? And number 4 is change, but also Linda Aronson talks about the internal journey. And what sort of a change that person, that character is going to go through from the beginning to the end of the journey. Of course, when you are writing a screenplay, you're not going to think about this grammar and trying to fill these little niches and the framework with characters and stories. That's not how I write, that's not how you write. But it is actually sometimes useful to understand the screenplay grammar, just to make sure and sometimes to express it to others and also to clarify in your mind, this is what is happening in my story.
මලදානේ කණ්ඩාවද?
ඇන්ටි මං කියන දේ පොඩ්ඩක් අහන්නකෝ.
මොනවා අහන්නද? මොකටද?
ඇන්ටි අපි මේක මෙතනින් අයින්
යනවා යන්න මෙතනින්. යන්නයි කිව්වේ. මෙයා දීපල්ලා හිඟන්නන්ට.
So, now let's go back again to my original steps. So we have finished 4 steps so far, and we are now arriving at the 5th step, philosophy. Do you have to be a philosopher when you are writing a screenplay? Not really, but it is almost inevitable to not find a philosophy underneath the words of your screenplay. A good screenplay will be rich of little points that you can drag out, pinpointing towards certain philosophical aspect. It could be political, it could be spiritual, it could be religious, something. You wonder why? Why philosophy? We are creative writers. We don't need philosophy. No, you don't need philosophy. But it is almost impossible to avoid philosophy. If you are a good writer, there will be philosophy in your screenplay. So I would say this: hide valuable gems under multiple layers of your rich storyline. Hide valuable gems under multiple layers of your rich storyline. If your storyline is very rich, there will be not one layer, there will not be 2 layers, there will be multiple layers. And underneath these multiple layers, you can hide. You don't have to do it consciously. There will be little hidden gems, little references, very rich references to certain political norms, certain cultural norms, and certain things about this deep part of the relationship, emotions, and so forth. And let me explain this with a little bit of a small example from Panshu film. I'm scratching my back here. Yeah, of course, I'm the writer of that story, but Possibly this is the best way for me to explain what I mean by hiding gems in this, under the layers of the rich storyline. So when I started writing the storyline, it is of course about a mother's personal journey looking for the disappeared son. So it is a very personal story, and it is about a mother and son. So of course you can't then forget and ignore the second layer of the storyline, which is a political story. This is a particular time that the state has decided to kill its own people, because the state was so worried that state is going to lose its power, because there was an insurgency, and a lot of people, a lot of young people wanted to take over the power of the state. And if we go into a bit more details, the state basically declared a state of exception, in the word of Goju Agamben. So this state of exception creates a concept called bare life, according to Goju Agamben. And bare life means there are no human rights, there is no dignity. The humans become bare, free of rights and free of any dignity. And that's what happened to this country during that particular time, 1989-1988. Thousands and thousands of young people were abducted and taken away from their homes and massacred. And massacred in the way that they don't have dignity, they don't have rights, and they don't have value. And then, this is the political undertheme or the political layer. And then also there is some sort of a spiritual layer. Let's put the politics aside. Let's look at this mother's religious affiliation. She's a Buddhist. And she believes about the existence of the sun, that sun is alive. And she thinks the dreams that she had were dreams about the sun is really alive and seeking her help. And when she realizes her son has gone and been murdered, then she thinks about the afterlife of the life of the son. So she wants peace to the son's afterlife. And then there is this notion of impermanency of the life, and this notion of reincarnation, this notion of sins and merits and all these things, the notion of suffering, which are very much part of Buddhist philosophy, is presented in the third underneath layer. So, this is what I mean by layers, multiple layers. And then, between these layers, we hide gems, references. Let me put one very obvious reference that a lot of people have seen in this film, is the Four Omen, when the Prince Siddhartha, before he became Buddha, before he left his home and the palace actually, he has seen 4 omens. And these 4 omens were represented in this film in female gender. And a lot of people have seen it. It is not as a necessary element there. And a lot of people without any exposure to Buddhist culture wouldn't have seen it. A lot of people in the international audience wouldn't have understood it, but it is there. A little gem, I thought. And then there is another gem, less obvious. That is when Baba Nona, the mother of this disappeared son, goes to the Buddhist temple, she was given a shirt by the Buddhist monk. And there is a story behind it. Of course, a lot of people would know it because we have never told the story in the movie. But she does something. She actually uses her palm and measures the shirt. And this is an old way of measuring things by our mothers and grandmothers and so forth. She measures that shirt to check whether that shirt is the same size of her son's shirt. And later, in the second half of the film, she gives away that shirt to her nephew because she has found out that her son is not going to come back. So these are the other gems. Some people would dig them out, some people would notice it. That is fine. That's what we call rich storyline, and that is the idea of being philosophical about your own story. Now, do you have to be a philosopher to write the screenplay? Absolutely not. It is better if you don't. But what happens is you can't help avoiding finding certain philosophy in your storytelling. And also, it is best you look for these aspects after you write your screenplay rather than before writing the screenplay. But I must confess, I sometimes look for that before I finish off my work.
හාමුදුරනේ මේ කමිස දෙක
ඔන්න ඔය කමිස දෙක කාට හරි දුන්නා නම් උසාවියේ එක්කෙනෙක් අඳුරගත්තයි කියලා ආරංචි.
එහෙමයි හාමුදුරනේ.
අරේ යුද්ධයත් තියේදී හමුදාවේ අය උසාවි ගානේ ගෙන්නලා මොනවට රත්යාදු කරනවද මන්ද?
That is about philosophy. Now let's move to the next step. But before moving to the next step, I would like to share some visuals with you and some sketches and the corresponding screen, the corresponding picture frame with you. So what you see here, there are 3 sketches and then 3 picture frames. And these sketches actually were almost identically represented in the movie at a later stage. The top one is one about the mother measuring the shirt which was given to her by the Buddhist monk. And the second one is about the mother doing a lot of laundry in the local village lake. And the third one is the confrontation between the mother and her nephew in the last stage of the film. If you have seen this film, you would know some of these frames. And I thought you might find it interesting because this is the way that my vision becomes reality. Okay, now I'm ready to write. It is step 6. All this time I haven't touched a piece of paper or a pen, or I haven't approached my keyboard of my laptop yet because I was daydreaming, I was thinking, I was talking to my characters, I was acting, I was writing separate unrelated things, and I was looking for my vision. And now I think I have my vision and I have my full picture before me, and I have a very clear understanding about where I am heading. It is time for me to write. Of course, this is not the step this is not the path that everyone would take. Every individual screenwriter would have a different particular style of moving forward and developing their stories. But this is my way of doing it. Before writing, I do a lot of dreaming and homework. And only at the 6th point, I start writing. I should write until I feel it right. What do I mean by that? When you keep writing, you just think, oh, that is not right, or something is wrong here, and that is your instinct. I would support that you should follow your instinct always. Until you feel right, you should keep writing and rewriting and self-editing. Until you think, I found the right story, the right version is with me, I think you should keep writing. If I say it in another way, you should keep writing until you think you have found the right final draft. And it might come in your second or third draft, but you might otherwise have to keep writing for 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 draft. Once you think that you have approached the stage of feeling right, it is the time that you can share your screenplay, the draft screenplay, with your trusted friends and colleagues. Let them see it, let them read it, and let them say what they think about your story. And sometimes, of course, you can have a little workshop with all your friends and colleagues, and workshop of reading, and you make the experience of screenplay reading more live in a reading session as a group, and let them give their feedback to you. But one thing is really, really important. The feedback is necessary for you to get an overall idea about what other people think. And it is important that you listen to them, but it is also important that you don't obey them. You don't take everything that they say, and you don't want to incorporate everything that everybody are proposing. Of course, that is not possible. And some people, of course, don't do that. Some people actually, until they get the final draft, they don't show their screenplay to anyone else. And that is perfectly all right as well. For me, I share my screenplay with few people, and I want to hear what they think. And when I share my screenplay, I do it with few different people who are not similar to each other, from different countries, representing different gender, ethnic groups, and so forth. Now it is time to rewrite. Point number 7 is rewriting. That is a large leg of my screenplay writing journey. Rewriting means, again, a lot of self-editing. And it is not this time that you are rewriting until you feel right, but until everyone else feel right. Why is that? Because you are making this film not alone. You are making this film with a lot of other people, and they will have a say, and you have to listen to them. So it is important that other people also feel right about your storyline and your screenplay. So you are not going to make a film by yourself. You have to get a lot of different people involved. And this journey that you have to go through, not alone with a lot of people. So you could be the screenwriter only, or you could be doing both jobs as a screenwriter and director. Either way, I think you should work together. And you should make sure that everyone feel very happy and satisfied about what you're going to say. Of course, you can't make everyone happy, but at least you should try to understand the fact that this is actually a creation, not something that you create not individually, but as a group.
අනේ අපි මොන තරම් පව් කරලා ඇතිද මේ වහන්න දකින්න. ආයෙත් මේවා දැක දැක විඳවන්න. නැන්දට හිටපු එකම පුතා නේද නැන්දේ? බැරි වෙච්ච කාලෙක බලා කියා ගන්නවත් කෙනෙක් නෑ නේද? නැන්දේ මගෙත් මේ එකම දරුවා නැන්දේ. අපේ එක්කෙනාගේ නම් පවුලේ පිරිමින්ම 5 දෙනෙක්. 4 දෙනෙක්ම හමුදාවේ. දෙන්නෙම කොටි ගහලා මැරුණා නැන්දේ. මේ නඩුව අතහැරලා දාන්න නැන්දේ. නඩු කිව්වයි කියලා නැන්දගේ මැරිච්ච පුතා පහු වෙන්නේ නෑ නේද?
Here, what you see on my screen is a sketch of a horoscope. You wonder why a horoscope? You know, in Sri Lanka or in some other countries like India, people would read their horoscope because they want to get some sort of a forecast about their future and to know what's going to happen next. Whether your child is going to have a good education, whether he's going to have a good career, whether he's going to marry or not, if he's going to get married, when, and if he's going to have children, how many, and so forth. Horoscope readers, what they actually do is they look at different planetary arrangements and try to set those planetary arrangements in this particular grid of the horoscope and then make some sort of a forecast based on the movements of the planets and the stars. Don't ask me whether this is scientifically proven or not, but that's not the point. The point is, when someone is born, that person could go into multiple directions. And horoscope readers say that is based on the movement of the planets and the stars. And you and me perhaps say everything is based on the fate or destiny, whatever. Either way, what I want to say here is one person's life may start in one point and could go into multiple different directions. So we have chosen one particular direction in our screenplay. And by now, at the very large stage of our screenplay writing exercise, we now see some problems. And this problem is such a bugging issue and it is really difficult to sort out. What are we going to do about it? It looks like it is almost impossible to sort this problem out with the existing framework. Perhaps we have to think new. And Sid Field actually talk about unthinking or shedding. That's what we have to do in a time like that. It could be heartbreaking because you have put all this energy into this piece of writing and now you have to change the entire direction. But sometimes you have to do that. And this is where this idea of horoscope comes handy. Think about one particular plot point that our protagonist is confronted with one particular problem. That protagonist could have done something. For example, let's think about Baba Nona, the main role in this film. She is confronted with the bitter truth of her son would have involved in some criminal activities. Her son would have been responsible for murder of another person. Now, what is the moral dilemma that she is going to confront with? Now, she is demanding justice for the death of her son. At the same time, someone else hasn't demanded justice for the death of another person, and his son could have been responsible for. In this moral dilemma, she takes a particular standpoint and she changes her directions towards giving up pursuing the legal proceedings. And she didn't have to do that. She could have gone in a different direction.
එහෙනම් ඇයි සාක්ෂි දෙන්න බෑ?
බයකට නෙවෙයි.
එහෙනම්
So I think this is what I would call shedding and unthinking. In fact, this is what Sid Field say about considering new options, completely new options. Okay, so you have done everything. We have come to the 7th last point. Our exercise is over and we have a final draft of the screenplay. But let me say one more thing about screenplay writing. If it is too short, you can add more pieces. You can work on more new scenes. But if your screenplay is too long and too lengthy and it is a bit boring and dragging, what can you do? Here, I have a little exercise for you. I would lay all these different cards that I told you about, the scenes, on the floor or on a board or wherever it is. And I will categorize them into 3 main categories: the primary scenes, the secondary scenes, and tertiary. Tertiary scenes, not so important, and I would call these tertiary scenes as scenes must go. Those scenes should not stay in your screenplay. They are there to be removed. Okay. And then there are vast majority of scenes which are secondary scenes. I would call them, I can live without them. I want those scenes, but sometimes I'm okay to lose them. So I can live without them. Then primary scenes. Primary scenes are very, very important for a writer. And I would identify those primary scenes in this manner. Over only my dead body, you're going to remove this scene. You have to kill me to remove this scene. That's how important those scenes are. I'm so passionate about those scenes. And I'm never going to let these scenes go. And a writer can have those scenes in the screenplay. So once you arrange all your scenes and all your elements of your story under these 3 categories, you are ready to remove one category, the tertiary category. And then you can work with the rest. You can sometimes fill the gap with little bit of addition, such as one little dialogue or one little additional shot into the screenplay. So we have been talking about 7 steps of screenplay writing. Now let's have a quick catch up. Number 1, idea. 2, scope. 3, storytelling. 4, vision. 5, philosophy. 6, write. 7, rewrite. I believe now you have a very clear idea about the steps that I usually would take when it comes to screenplay writing. You don't, of course, have to follow the same steps, but some of these steps may be useful for you when you are doing your job. We have come to the end of the masterclass, and I believe you have a very good idea about my way of screenplay writing. And I hope I have given some ideas for you to think about your screenplay writing. And also, don't think that I am only telling you what to do. I'm also learning from other people what they do. And keep learning, keep reading, keep finding out about how other people do their work. And be inspired and write a good screenplay. Good luck.